Have you ever thought about why for so many years you have always ended up searching on Google? How Google came to be known as the god of internet? And why Google might have to crumble down from this position? This video has all the answers. Somewhere in the Bay Area in late 2018, the two CEOs of Google and Apple met for their once-in-a-year sojourn. In general, Cook was extremely happy with the partnership they had with Google.
We want to be deep partners, deeply connected where our services end and yours begin.
But Apple executives were concerned about a decline in revenue growth from their revenue share deal, where Google paid a large undisclosed sum of money to be the default search engine on Safari. That is when Pichai responded with a proposal.
What if Apple pre-installed a Google search app on every iOS device?
He then strengthened his case.
Search is what we do. People trust us to get this right.
Google had seen that the Google app and widget were popular on Android and drove people to do more searching. More Google searches on Apple devices would mean more revenue for Apple. Everybody wins.
Let's sign a 20-year deal.
Apple famously doesn't preload third-party software onto its devices. But Tim Cook thought about it at least once before killing the proposal. Google's massive empire has been built on one little white search bar. Not so little as Washington District Judge Amit Mehta found after 10 weeks of testimony from more than 50 witnesses in hearings closed to the public, when he ruled against Google in a 276-page antitrust judgment.
Google is a monopolist, and it has exploited its market dominance to stomp out rivals,
giving the company that performs 90% of the world's internet searches one of the most serious challenges it has ever faced, including a possible forced breakup where Google would be prevented from using Chrome and Android OS to better Google search. We'll tell you the astonishing facts revealed in the trial and what goes on behind the scenes of these American giants. But if you're new to Bisbo, please do subscribe, like, comment, and share. Google has long paid to be the default search engine in Safari since 2002, paying Apple $18 billion in 2021 for the privilege. It also paid other browsers like Mozilla, Firefox, and Yahoo a total of $8.3 billion. A figure both Apple and Google try to keep confidential, objecting to the question directed to their defense witness.
How much? 18 billion.
Whose revelation made Google's lawyer visibly cringe. Further revealing, Google gave Apple 36% of all search ad revenue that came from Safari. But for Google, even this $18 billion was a steal, because if it weren't the default search engine on Apple's Safari, it would have lost revenues worth $50 billion. Left with no choice, Apple vigorously defended the numbers.
We make Google the default search engine because we've always thought it was the best. Users can easily change away from it.
Easily is, of course, a key and persistent point of contention in this trial. Take DuckDuckGo, whose market share is only 100 million global searches a day compared to Google's several billion.
Switching is way harder than it needs to be. There are just too many steps. Consumers should be able to choose their default search engine in one click, in contrast to the 15 complicated steps currently on Android.
Though on Apple's Safari, it can be done in only 4 steps, taking just seconds. Google's lawyers countered with an example that pre-selection wasn't a big hurdle, claiming rightly that Bing, which is pre-selected on Windows PCs, which have 1 billion plus users, doesn't give Microsoft the edge.
Yet most PC users switch to Google because it's a better product.
Though back in 2005, when Microsoft's Internet Explorer dominated the market, just 5 days before the launch of IE7, Google's then top lawyer wrote to Microsoft, asking them to offer a choice screen to new IE7 users.
Original default settings are very seldom changed to Google.
Microsoft refused, and not long after, Pichai and a small team would start working on Chrome, which would eventually crush Explorer entirely. Now, the shoe is on the other foot. Google's Android agreement requires manufacturers to prominently display a pre-installed Google search widget on phones, something that has been legally contentious in the European Union for years because it allows Google to further improve its search results, which is why the Department of Justice believed
this case is about the future of the internet and whether Google search will ever face meaningful competition.
2 distinct events were instrumental in DOJ's case against Google. When a district judge ruled that Apple could maintain its lockdown iOS ecosystem, and after Microsoft was allowed by a court in October 2023 to buy Activision Blizzard by convincing judges that they weren't simply trying to lock up a market, they were helping consumers too, saying companies who failed to compete in the market were the ones complaining. In Apple's case, the Fortnite publisher Epic had added a direct payment mechanism to its hit Battle Royale game in violation of Apple's rules. In response, Apple removed the game from its App Store, resulting in Epic filing an antitrust lawsuit accusing Apple of monopolistic practices. In Microsoft's case, it successfully argued that they had to undertake a rapid consolidation in the games industry, as their far larger rival console maker Sony threatened to leave them in the dust. Competition was at the heart of Google's argument as well.
Agreements to keep Google as the default search engine on Android helped create a viable mobile competitor to iOS.
But Google's huge volume of contentious internal communications negates that argument, where it repeatedly states the huge benefit it gets from being the default search option. So much so that Google explicitly agreed as part of its search deal with Apple that it would not promote Chrome to Safari users. Pichai was confronted with a 2007 email sent to him after a Google product strategy meeting that showed whenever people changed their browser homepage to Google, they did 15% more Google searches, and when they switched away, did 27% less.
Focusing on the homepage is one of the most effective things we can do to make gains in search market share.
But Pichai defended well,
Deals are about more than just money.
showing how Google uses revenue share to incentivize Android OEMs like Samsung, HTC, and Motorola to promote their devices, and that because Android OS is free, smartphones can come at affordable prices starting from as low as $30.
Helping bring hundreds of millions of people online all over the world.
Some of the money Google makes on revenue share is allocated for security updates or for developing the next version, which ultimately benefits consumers. So it is no wonder, despite the adverse ruling, the judge complimented them.
I struggle to see how Google has become less innovative over time because of a lack of meaningful competition.
And it is not as though Google doesn't have to watch its back. In 2016, it upped the share it paid to Apple via search, as it was worried that Amazon was flirting with them, who were willing to pay Apple top dollar if it would bypass Google and send shopping search data directly to them. Google also worried about Apple's new suggestions feature in Safari, which would help users without sending everyone to Google's results page. This case mirrors the 1990s antitrust ruling against Microsoft, which also had internal communication about how they had cut off Netscape's air supply in the browser wars, where the DOJ forced Microsoft to allow Apple products to run on Windows PC, ironically making it a significant beneficiary of that ruling.
The remedy paved the way for Apple to launch iTunes, free from anti-competitive restrictions, excessive fees, and retaliation.
Acutely aware of this, Google issued a memo in 2003 urging Googlers to be sensitive about what words they use, even internally, citing the air supply example. Additionally, Google and Apple have for years faced monopoly complaints against their app stores. Alphabet settled by paying consumers $700 million and opened up the Play Store to competition, but still insists of levying a service fee of 27%, not much less than the current 30% it charges. They also agreed to settle a consumer privacy lawsuit after an internal email showed they were being followed even while browsing in incognito mode. While Spotify's antitrust complaint in the EU against Apple resulted in a $2 billion fine early this year via their new law, Digital Markets Act. Judge Mehta's 32-page document lays out a framework of remedies to be imposed on Google to restore competition. Microsoft's Bing, which has struggled to crack 4% market share for many years, could be a big beneficiary from the ruling. Now Google is preparing to face yet another antitrust trial, this time for unfairly dictating prices to advertisers in the market for software used to buy and sell digital ads, aka ad tech. Postscript. In the 1980s, when Pac-Man first came into American homes, they used Nintendo's home entertainment system to do so, paying them 30% for using their platform. This seems to be the origin story behind the 30% digital distribution fee that platforms charge to this day. Bisbo's limerick. Apple and Google made a secret pact. They banded together and competition hacked. But the facts tumbled out, leaving one in no doubt that they overstretched their limits and penalties attract. You will also find these sources listed in our video description section.